You're in the right place if you're looking for Track A and you're looking for KM and Engineering in the Enterprise case studies. So we're going to hear from 3 professionals today who've been doing this and leading the way for people like myself for quite a while. And we've got 45 minutes to do it. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We'll let people file in as they need to. First, we're going to hear from Felicia Levy, a strategic knowledge leader. And then we're going to hear from Greg Turcotte and Tamara from TechnipFMC. They're going to be representing the KM and the engineering sides. So we're going to go ahead and get started with Felicia, and we're going to save questions till the end. Thank you.
So there are defined metrics like average handle time or case deflection, and then the transformation must occur in order to remain competitive. But when it comes to internal systems, it's different. So from the internal perspective, content doesn't generate revenue, and content creation is something that's done when all of your other work is completed and you have time on your hands. The problem becomes, how do you make engineers see the value of content creation, content reuse, and content reliability? It's not part of what they consider their day-to-day work. Okay. So when I started the KM project, I learned that the first thing I needed to do was explain what knowledge management is. What are its benefits, and why should engineers be interested in KM? KM was new and a foreign concept to most of the engineers. So the first thing I did was I created this KM awareness elevator pitch, and I set up one-to-one meetings to introduce myself and explain KM to the identified stakeholders. Now, besides giving me an opportunity to introduce myself to the stakeholders and show them what KM is, these meetings really formed the basis for the stakeholder analysis. Now, after diving into that stakeholder analysis, I found that there were really 4 key issues that were identified that needed to be addressed. The biggest issue was the overall growth of the organization. And in 5 years, the company had moved from a very small company to a medium-sized company. Now, as a small company, there was a single office where everyone knew each other. And as a medium-sized company, they now had to be able to support a global workforce that really was focused on a remote culture. And in the past, it was easy to walk over to someone else and ask them a question. What do you need? All right. Oh, wow. Now I am really loud. That's better? Much better? All right. So in the past, it was easy to walk over to someone else and you might ask them a question. But now, it was really hard to know who the right person to ask would be or even where to find them. So the second issue that bubbled up was the hoarding of information. And I think this is an underlying concern for many people as we ask them to share their knowledge and insights. And the feeling is that if I share my knowledge, then I give up how valuable I am to the organization. And it's probably the hardest cultural change to manage. So along with hoarding of information, an organization that's growing means that the core knowledge resides in the brains of just a few people. And again, this goes back to the value that someone brings to the organization. If they believe that their value is based on the secrets that they keep, then they're not willing to share. So lastly, the time for new hires to onboard and get up to speed is significantly delayed if knowledge isn't documented and accessible. A new hire doesn't know who in the organization has the information, and they're going to spend a lot of time looking for it. When a new hire starts, the company wants to put their best foot forward, and asking a new hire to spend time searching for information does not make for a good first impression. So the question becomes, how do you bring change to a workforce that is resistant to change? To a workforce that has always done things in a certain way, and they really see no reason to change it. So to tackle this, I implemented 3 strategies. First, I focused on cultural change. The employees needed to know and understand and believe that sharing information would not make them redundant. Leveraging practices from KCS, I created a knowledge worker program to support the growth and development of the workforce. So this included developing a training program that highlighted the benefits of sharing knowledge. And more important was the message that by sharing knowledge, you can move up in your career. It's hard to take on more complex work when you're the only person that can do your current role. There was also the need for everyone to buy into the change in culture. So tech writers are not the only knowledge creators. Everyone in the engineering organization is a knowledge creator. Teaching the workforce how to create and share knowledge within the, step away, it gets really quiet. Teaching the workforce how to create and share knowledge within the flow of the existing workload was critical. Now, the second strategy was to leverage existing technology. And there are two areas of focus here. First was implementing an enterprise search. Information across the organization was siloed and stored in multiple platforms. So not only did you have to know what you were looking for, you also had to know where to look. Should you look in SharePoint or in Confluence? Is the test plan in Confluence or is it in someone's head? Is there a defined test strategy? Information that you create needs to be findable and accessible to the audience that you created it for. The second focus area was to implement a content strategy process. Information should only be entered into one system, which is the source of truth. Other systems should pull from the source of truth or that system of record. And the third leg of the stool was to enhance operational efficiency and drive continuous improvement. A governance model was needed to be established, and I needed to get buy-in from the stakeholders that new policies and procedures would be adhered to. Providing that standardization of all processes and procedures and templates by creating step-by-step instructions and how-to guides help with this aspect. Okay. So now, armed with an idea of the issues and a strategy, this is what I did to tackle implementing an engineering enablement solution. Okay. Ultimately, this was really about cultural and organizational change. So the first step was to identify who those champions were. Who would be the key stakeholders in the engineering org that would partner and collaborate with us? Very simply, I set up these one-to-one meetings and I really just listened. Everyone likes to have an audience to voice their pain points. Everyone wants to feel that they're being heard. But by listening to their concerns and issues, I began to develop those relationships. And as the relationships grew, I could start to probe and ask the harder questions. You know, how does the process really work? Why do you have to go around those technology solutions? Why hasn't this information been captured? The one-to-one listening sessions don't necessarily scale, but they're really important for building that foundation of trust. Now, as trust built, people began to come to my team with issues that they needed help with, and it ranged from working through existing release processes to data flow diagrams to security requirements. And at the top level, there was strong support from executive leadership. I found that the executive leadership is important, but really middle management was the key. They're the ones that are handling the day-to-day work, and they're the ones that are most impacted by the changes. They're the ones that needed to really buy into the new processes and ideas. So, as an example, in one of my divisions, we built relationships with the key team members who were frustrated with the current systems. And within that group, we found a smaller group that was investing in fixing their problem, and they were willing to prioritize their content organization. So one area of success led to more groups willing to do the same. The engineers really just needed to see what was possible. Leader support was also critical, as was constantly talking about the successes in communication mechanisms like Slack or in Chatter, putting it out in newsletters, just continually sharing what was making the engineers' lives easier. Okay, so let's dive into the engineering issue a bit more. It really was a content strategy and organization problem. And over the years, the team had created 270 pages of content. Now, for this content, there was a lack of standardization of the templates, there was no labeling of the documents, there was no architecture guidelines, there weren't adequate content tools, there wasn't a good understanding of what each tool could do, there was a problem of documenting the requirements for different audiences and different personas, and the native search within the tools just really wasn't great. So the content itself wasn't organized, and at the basis, there wasn't even a home page, and information was just scattered within the hierarchical trees. So from the knowledge workers' perspective, they really were scared to reorganize the chaos. They had bookmarked what they needed, and as far as they were concerned, everything was fine. It was fine for the people that had been doing this for 5+ years, but for someone that was coming into the organization, this was utter chaos. So my team really started very small, recognizing the fear that the engineers had in dismantling what they had built. So we started by defining the content types and creating a landing page. And these were two functions that the team really could get behind and understand. They didn't take a lot of work, but it allowed us to put some structure around the existing content. Now, once the structure was in place, engineers could begin to see where their content should live based on the content types. And from there, they could see what content was duplicated or outdated. What they needed was a slight nudge in the right direction and a visualization of their existing content. And as the content decreased and what was left became more useful, they became more engaged and more evangelical. And they began to share their success with the other teams who then wanted to work with the KM team to clean up their content. All right, so what are the takeaways from this experience? Well, people, even engineers, do not always know how to use the existing tools in the most efficient way. And over time, they had developed workarounds that were fine for a small, centralized workforce. But that same workforce and those same workarounds didn't work when you became a remote global workforce. And until we mapped out the processes and asked the hard questions, we really didn't understand that the engineers really actually preferred face-to-face interactions over communicating asynchronously. We were driving asynchronous communication and productivity, and what they wanted to do was hang out and chat. So they were using their meeting times and having face-to-face meetings as a way to facilitate this. So we work with talent and culture to actually implement monthly remote team building events that were really purely social. Things like a guided painting class or creating an herb garden or a wine tasting event. And once we gave them back a routine time for connecting, we were able to move them more to that asynchronous communications during that workday. So this meant that people in China were now no longer waiting 24 hours for a response from someone in the US. Because once we could separate chatter and communications and socialization from the workday, we were able to move the workday forward. Now, engineers really believe in tools. They believe that tools can do anything and everything. Now, if you put it in the tool will figure out what to do with it. Now, this created a general lack of accountability for the relevance and maintenance of the content. We also found that there was a belief that one tool was as good as another. Sure, both SharePoint and Confluence, they allow you to document information. But how that information is stored and retrieved and maintained is very different. So by defining those content types and understanding the best tool in the overall suite of tools available, we were able to better organize the content and define where it should be stored so that people would know when they're looking for requirement specs, they need to be in this tool, not that tool. All right. So engineers, at least our engineers, tended to be really experiential learners. And they needed to actually see an example of what KM is and how it would work. Conceptual ideas were meaningless, but a good diagram workflow, that would get you really far. So we created strawmans for every change, and we showed it to them. That allowed them to provide feedback and to critique the strawmans and explain why it would or would not work. It also generated a lot of additional ideas, so once they could start to visualize where we were going, they could add on to that. I've lost the mouse. There we go. Okay. So the last thing is that we started the journey by approaching KM for engineers as we would for customers or sales or marketing teams. And we quickly found out that the issues for internal KM solutions, because they're not directly tied to revenue, they have really different challenges. We needed to use a different strategy, focus more on organizational and cultural change rather than on implementing KCS principles. So we ended up taking some of the principles from enablement solutions and some from KCS in order to develop the overall engineering solution. So that's what we did for engineering enablement. And now I'm going to turn it over to Technip. That's you.
All right, this is the most dangerous part of the presentation. All right, it went okay.
Okay, you guys can still hear me? That's a yes. I'm sorry. I'm at the age where I require 2 sets of glasses now. So sorry. At any rate, thank you guys so much for being here today. We're going to be talking about how when learning, knowledge management, and engineering join forces, we do stuff a smart way. Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Tamara. I'm a knowledge management program manager.
And I'm Greg Turcotte. I'm a senior manager of engineering quality, which is different than quality engineering, believe it or not. And we're very excited because we do believe there is a great partnership to be had between engineering and knowledge management.
Absolutely. So he's our token engineer, so we've got to be nice to him.
There you go.
So a little bit about our company first. We are a leader in the energy industry. We have two primary business units, subsea and surface, and we have a huge focus on new energy. As you can imagine, our industry is going through quite the revolution. We have about 21,000 employees located in 39 different countries. So you can see why our scope and our size and just the amount of people around the world, why KM is so important to connect and empower and educate our employees.
So here's our agenda. First, I'm going to share with you our Take 5 moment. Then we'll talk about what life was like before KM, for those of you who were in the storytelling track earlier.
And then we're going to talk about what life was like after KM joined the project team and how we were able to amplify the work that was done by Greg and his team.
So what a Take 5 is, and maybe you've heard this before, but in our company, every meeting, you're supposed to take 5 minutes to reinforce your core values and your foundational beliefs, such as safety, quality, those kind of things. This one, we thought we would use it on explaining what GD3 is. If you were to Google it or look at it on Wikipedia, you might find it under Musumbushi or something like that, or even GD cubed. But for us, it's GD3 because when we went to put it in our systems, we figured out we couldn't deal with the superscript. But at its heart, it is not a tool, it is a design methodology that starts with 3 GDs. So at the top you see good design. That is knowing what's good about your products, knowing where you need to improve, fixing the things you need to fix, but not getting too creative in the areas where you already have good performance, because you can unwittingly induce product failures by getting a little too fancy in a place where you didn't even need to. If no one cares about changing it, by gosh, keep it the same. Then you have good discussion. This is getting groups of people together from across the product lifecycle, bringing their expertise into the design phase when you can actually make changes, when your thought of what could be done differently or needs to be done differently can actually be put in place without ruining your budget or your schedule. So that's what good discussion does. It uses a tool called Design Review Based on Failure Modes, or DRBFM for short. That's probably the last time I'll say that in this presentation. And then good dissection is for testing and evaluation. So it is a structured way to look at how your product fared in the testing environment. We've had cases where we've had to do a 200 cycle test and it passed. And then when they took it apart to get it out of the test cell, they wondered if it would make it one more. So what does that mean? Does our product going to see 201 cycles, 205 in the field? That's a big question. So this is a way to also bring that life cycle approach into that place. So the first 2 GDs started in Toyota, and then the third one was added at General Motors. It's gone throughout the automotive industry. It's now in aerospace, a lot of military applications, life cycle applications, and then now we're using it in energy. We had an early adopting team that was using this, and they got together and they used one of the tools that's part of the methodology to look at how things fit together. And this was a big piece of rotating mechanical equipment. And they realized they had 6 engineers working on the project, and each one of them had a different vision of how this thing was going to actually function and fit together. Now, if you think about how engineers, a lot of times you do it, you get your scope, you divide it up, everybody goes to their desk, they work on it, then they come back together. Well, what do you have then, right? You've got a Frankenstein. So that team had a great benefit. One of the lead engineer on that team, when we had gone through the full DRBFM with him, he told me, he said, you know, if my manager said, you're not allowed to do this, I would spend time in the evening sneaking this. It's that good. It gives me a better product. So I would do it on my own, even if they wouldn't allow me time to do it. At that point, we knew we had them.
It was the ultimate metric for us. But honestly, what our company is doing with GD3 is essentially applying KM principles to our product design process, increasing communication, increasing collaboration, documenting all components of the process when we create new products or when we modify existing ones. And that's a big deal because we have hundreds of products, some of them this size of a bus, and then they have 100 or more subcomponents, hundreds. And so what GD3 did was essentially change the way our engineers were going to do their work. It was big, and we needed to roll it out.
Yep. If you want to know more about GD3, happy to have a cup of coffee with you later.
So why is KM helpful to engineering? How does engineering benefit from KM? I don't know if you noticed on the first slide that there was a picture of a guitar and an amplifier. Yeah, it's meant to be a metaphor for this whole presentation because although a single acoustic guitar makes a beautiful noise, it can only be heard by a few people. But if you plug that instrument into an amplifier, it can be heard by thousands. And that's what we were able to do for Greg and his team, exponentially increase the adoption, awareness, and acceptance and education of this big change for our engineers.
Yes. And so then one of the big concepts that's come up is the phrase, the book of knowledge. And this started in Toyota. They physically write their design review based on failure modes down in books, handwritten, and they call that the book of knowledge. Well, we started talking about it. No way we're going to work that way, but we do want a book of knowledge. And our vision for the book of knowledge is everything that you would need. You know, your part reports, your design basis, your test results, all of the supporting documentation, it's available like that. It's linked together, and even to take it to the next step, when you're in the process of working on your design, could I get to any piece of information I need within, six clicks, less than 5 minutes to get there, and I know that it's not outdated. I know that it's been curated. I'm hearing all kinds of knowledge management, principles in that. And we had this idea before we actually talked to you. So let's go back to what our journey was like just a little bit before KM got involved. So this is back about 2019. We had some ideas that we needed to improve quality. We wanted, engineering was going to take a forward-thinking role in that process. So we started looking at some different things, saw an article on lean.org about a Toyota methodology. And that ended up linking us to a consultant who we hired. He came in, we did some kind of, is this fit cases, is this going to be all right? And then we started an implementation. Got about a year into the implementation, probably worked with about 5 different products. It was an okay start, but the environment that we're working in, you see all these slides. I've hopefully given you enough time to read through them. When you're working with engineers, they think about how stuff gets done. Okay, so if you haven't thought about that, they're going to mess with you. And a lot of times they're right when they tell you what needs to happen. So they do think they know better. We've had a mixed history with process improvements. We've tried every flavor in the month. I like to say if you walk through our buildings, you would find every management book from the last 30 years, except we did 5S, so they're all gone. But, we do. Every manager that takes over a department, you now have ownership of creating new processes. That's just been the way that it's kind of been culturally. We're very decentralized in a lot of ways. And then last few years have been great for us from a business standpoint, except the too busy to improve attitude is alive and well. So I talked a little bit about the consultant. We got a team together. Yeah, let's go to the Parthenon. And we came up with these 5 pillars that we needed. And just to explain what they are, you see knowledge management. That's not what we're talking about at this conference. It's where do I store my documents? But a bunch of engineers, we thought we were doing the right thing. How are we going to train people? How do we connect to the existing processes we have? What do we need to do to communicate? And we're just using the tools available to us and all employees. And then how do we improve that process? And so a couple times during that year of trying to work towards this, and once again, we were seeing pretty good progress, so we thought. But hey, do we need to get the KM team in here? Would come up once in a while. And I actually was the roadblock, I will humbly admit. Yes, I'm standing here at KM World talking to you about this.
What a converter, though, right? We
That's-
brought him aboard.
Yeah, that's how life is. And I'll
That's
tell
right.
you,
Whoop, whoop.
I'll tell you, and so here's kind of a take-home point. At that time in our company, every time I had done anything with KM, no matter what it was, it came back to a particular facilitated collaboration tool, like, hey, well, let's get that in here. And I was like, you guys are a hammer looking for a nail. I don't, when I want some facilitated collaboration, we'll go get some. So I had a little bit of an attitude at that point, but I did,
He came around.
It came around, yeah. And so we said, okay, we need to make a change. We're not reaching enough people. We're disorganized. What are we going to do? So, we did the little web tool thing, and basically you make the call, I need help, and we didn't know who was going to answer the phone.
And it was me. I was so excited to pick up the phone and hear Greg's voice. But before I leave this slide, KMers, we know what's wrong with this, right? All of these are going to compete with one another. Does KM deserve a pillar? Little foreshadowing with what's to come.
Yeah.
So Greg reached a fork in the road. What was he going to do? And he called us. And I was so excited to take that call. I ran right into my boss. Her name is Kim Glover, as some of you know who she is. And she said, without even thinking, get involved, make it a priority. And that was for 2 reasons. The first of all, well, it's an engineering methodology. We're an engineering company. KM needs to be in where the real work is taking place. That was a given. But then the second reason was it was Greg. We did have a good working relationship leading up into this point. Knowledge management in our company has a reputation for delivering business value. We had already had established trust to some degree, even though we were a hammer finding.
Even though I had an attitude, I
attitude.
was still talking good.
Diffuse
back
that. We
then.
took his feedback and we made changes. So because of that, we were able to partner with that established trust. And it was obvious that whatever Greg needed to get done was important and we needed to be on the team. So that's when we joined up. So in the second year of the project, we partnered, we had a seat at the table, and what we needed to do is we had to roll this engineering design methodology that substantially affected the way our engineers were going to do work out to them. We would have to get them to use it, demonstrate that it was a benefit to the company and to them because it was going to eventually save them time, and we had to teach them how to use this complicated process. So where did we start? Well, we started by defining the learning requirements. Who needed to know what and when? And so we got together and we created a list of the employee groups, senior manager, design engineers, et cetera, that were going to be responsible for deploying GD3, understand what they needed to know and to what extent. And then we also put together a list of barriers we might encounter along the way that could slow or impede adoption. And then we came up with some ideas on how we could minimize that resistance. Once we knew what the learning requirements were for each of these employee groups, we had to come up with tactics that would satisfy those learning needs. That work is shown in this image on the right-hand side, the big one. Now, I know the font is hard to read, and I'm sorry for that, but what's important are the axes. Across the top, you've got the different employee groups. And then down the left-hand side, you have all the tactics that we deployed to satisfy those learning needs. And I'm sure that you're noticing that we have multiple tactics for each of those employee groups. Well, that's because we have a very diverse group of people located around the world, different cultures, different geographies, different learning styles. We needed to make sure that we were going to get through to them.
Yeah, and if you notice the lower left-hand corner there, that is the tactics that each team member, so my core team, we all own those individual sticky notes, and the top is just the months of the year, and then kind of what categories those things fit in. So I think Tammy did a really great job when she worked with us of not just giving us a fish. She taught us how to fish in the process.
And they were fearless. I'll get to that in a minute, too. We also did a RACI matrix so that we understood who was responsible for what. However, we added an E to the end of the acronym to capture those groups like senior leaders and sponsors so that they would evangelize our change with demonstrable support. That was that top down that we needed to encourage those laggards. And then once we knew who needed to know what, and we knew what solutions we were going to roll out, we had a RACI matrix, well, we needed a change strategy. So we came up with an ADCAR-like change process. You can see it's very much modeled on the ADCAR change management model that would show what tactics would roll depending on how much they needed to know about GD3. Now, the tactics get far more complicated or a little bit more sophisticated as you move from left to right. And those list of tactics that you see there, well, we'll go through those in a little bit more detail in just a minute.
So taking a look here at year 3 plan, so we did use a facilitated collaboration tool to get that. But I had seen that you cared, you know.
We do, we care.
You're able to show me what you knew. And so supporting implementation of how do we get people involved, providing governance for how do they know what they're doing is right or wrong, and then instilling it into the culture. That's been the hardest piece, and that's the piece we're still working the most on. And then plan, do, check, act is a common lean methodology for improving any process, doing that for the whole program. But you do see what our foundation is now.
Yeah, we went the right way, didn't we? So now our foundation is learning and knowledge management and all the tools and solutions that we deployed. And that serves as a strong foundation for these new set of pillars so that they can complement one another and not compete or cannibalize one another like they were doing previously. So now let's talk a little bit about some of those solutions that we rolled out. The first thing we did is we had to get everybody on the right page, right? So we came up with the True North. We developed a mission statement. Now there's a little trick I like to use when doing a mission statement. I ask 4 questions. What is it that we're doing? How are we going to do it? For whom are we going to do it? And what's the benefit of what we're doing? And we got the team together, we answered those questions, and then we coalesced all the responses, and we came up with this mission statement. It's pretty timeless. It's just as maybe even more so relevant today than it was at day 1 when I joined the team. Other things that we did, my God, how many pages did you create in the well? About 70?
Yeah, we have around 70.
The well is our enterprise wiki, and we had a very large chapter for reference. We also developed a community of practice for GD3 practitioners, and we had formal learning courses in our LMS. Other tactics that we used are demonstrated or shown down there below in that purple footer. We had a logo, we had Ask Us Anything sessions, we had testimonials and success stories. We recorded everything and we put them into the LMS and into our wiki. Feedback was super important to us, so we were consistently getting input as we were rolling this out and then checking our process and improving it where needed. Another thing that we did that was kind of fun, and this is that fearless comment that I talked about earlier. I'd go to this team and I'd say, what if we did this? And they'd always say,
Yeah, sure, why not?
Sure, why not? Let's go ahead and give it a go. Which is what you want in a team, right? I mean, you want your crazy ideas to come to fruition, and that happened with this expo. So we had the idea of having kind of a conference-like online session, and we had an opening session with a keynote speaker from the sponsor of our project. Then we had breakout sessions that followed. We used Teams, and then we broke out into other teams and had the sessions. You know, we had just about 1,600 people attend. We actually broke our teams for about 30 seconds. We brought it down for the company, so yay. But you know, if you're in learning and knowledge management, to get 1,600 hours of learning in one day, man, that feels good. That feels good. Mm-hmm. We also did an Experts Explain session. We have a podcast that we sponsored called Illuminate Knowledge Management. We did that. And we also have had really great luck in these short, bite-sized, 30-minute webinars that we call skill sessions. And in those, we can dive a little bit deeper down into our granular topics, because now we've progressed, right? We've got people that have adopted, and their questions are getting more complex. Mm-hmm. So real quick, some learning and key takeaways.
All right, so as you're reading these, that first quote, one of my favorite quotes, I don't care who gets the credit. This really embodied our team, and it embodied Tammy.
Yeah.
You know, this was not KM promotion time. This was let's make the company successful time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and the multiple modalities that we did, that was really important. It got us to business results faster because we were able to get to our target audience where they did the work, and that was super important. The other reason is hearkening back to our metaphor with the music. You know, we can amplify the work of our engineering community with our knowledge management tools and solutions effectively because we create the connections necessary among our engineers with their engineering leadership and with knowledge management in general.
Yeah, and it was mutually beneficial, so that's bullet number 2. The what's in it for me is so important to everybody. And engineering has taken a lot of leaps forward because of this and because of the KM efforts, and I think you've had a lot of spin-off business.
Yes. And now we're a powerful team looking for another project. So I think that we've started something in our engineering community because we have a great advocate for others to look up to. And that's our topic. Thank you for your attention. Any questions? Taylor is our moderator, and she's going to get the microphone around. And this is for our presenting partner, too. Come on, Felicia. Come here.
I'm curious what you consider to be primary knowledge artifacts for engineering teams. What are the target types of knowledge artifacts that we should be looking for and trying to kind of cultivate?
Did you want to answer that from an engineering perspective, and I'll back it up from
Well,
an
and keep in mind, a lot of those artifacts that I think you would identify, we already have a lot of product lifecycle software and tools and things to capture those. The problem is we have too much information and you can't find it. So that's where a lot of the management piece comes into. It's not that we don't have that knowledge, it's just either in someone's head or it's in a 25-year-old document or it's stuffed somewhere in this other corner of the database. That's been kind of the problem that I think about all the time.
It's true. And I think what Greg is talking about is our formal repository. So we have controlled spaces that have global work instructions and things that can't be modified. Our BPMS. BPMS stands for Global Process Management System. And, you know, those things are controlled and documented, version history, et cetera. And those we don't touch in knowledge management. We're really more responsible for the social learning side. And in regards to change management, the well would be what we would roll out. A well, anybody in an organization can create a modified page, and then we've got a 2-step approval process to make sure it's accurate.
Yeah.
So I would say the well is our knowledge base in knowledge management, and it's used heavily by our engineering people because everybody's empowered to create knowledge and document it. And then that's married to our communities of practice.
10 years ago.
Actually in the well, what types of things have you guys categorized?
Yeah.
Okay, so
No, that's a good, let me see.
then I'll jump in, sure.
Yeah, so 10 years ago, we would have wrote an engineering standard or an SOP or something like that and put it in our engineering database for where that information is. And then you would have to search in this product that is not very user-friendly. Now there's all kinds of product information in there. There's all kinds of process information in the wiki.
So we like to say our the BPMS, the process management system, defines the top 4 processes that everyone around the world must standardize on. What we have inside our enterprise wiki, we like to say goes down to process like 6 and 7 and 8, the fine detail that is customized to a particular project location, product, etc. We also have product information. Anything that goes back to formal resources is all linked to those resources. And anything can go in the wiki. It's got about 5,000 employee-created pages.
And what are you?
So for my organization, we have very similar issues, right? The content is everywhere, it's there, but nobody can find it. And in my organization, it was very siloed. So if you're on project team A, you have no access and no knowledge that the same document that you're building is sitting in project B. And so there was this duplication of effort. What we focused on really was standardization of templates. What are you writing? What are the fields? What are the subjects that you have to include in a requirements document, in a security review, in a data flow diagram, just so that across the organization, everyone would have, at least when you open the document, you at least know what you're going to find in that document.
Did that help? Okay. Any other questions?
Okay, go ahead. You give it a try.
I have 2 questions for both of you. When you have your knowledge repository established, what kind of overall general metrics do you use to report to leadership for sustainability of your program? And also, in an environment where an organizational structure changes, sometimes twice a year, and people are always coming and going, what are some specific strategies to not only help retain the knowledge, but also keep it accessible and shareable?
Okay, so metrics first.
All right, you want me to tackle that one? Or you want to-
Well, we both can.
Yep.
You go first.
Okay.
We went first
So-
last time.
So I really based most of my metrics off of a lot of the KCS metrics. So I'm looking at the back end of the search pieces. What are the engineers searching for? What are the pieces that are being typed into the search query that they're coming up with null results for them? And those are the pieces of content that we need to be looking at. I'm looking at how many times a wiki article is being accessed. What's the duration, spend time on that wiki article? I'm looking at really the overall engineer-employee journey. Where are they going from that article? How many times that article is being shared out? So those are the types of metrics that I was pulling from.
Ours are very much the same, a lot on viewership, metrics, the number of creators, the number of authors, because our wiki is so ingrained with our communities of practice. We also look at, the number of times discussions have been created, viewed, shared with other networks, how many responses, so a lot of analytics along that. We also have a lot of just open and feedback that we get. So we do knowledge management surveys, we have champions programs, we have a technical expertise program, and we're always hitting them up for feedback on how to improve. We do a lot of testing and behavioral testing so that we can keep at the forefront of what our communities require in order to be successful. And I can't remember your second question, I'm so sorry.
Strategies for change, constant change.
Well,
You go.
okay, strategies for constant change. You mean in our program? Or, like if people leave the company?
And when, for example, at the start, our knowledge repository was structured based on how our organization is structured.
Yeah,
And then after a few months, that changed, and then we had to
Yeah.
completely change the repository. It was a nightmare.
totally understand. So 2 different ways that we do it. So we have a technical expertise program that is not aligned with the organization. It's aligned by discipline. And that's how we keep that relevant. And it is organizationally agnostic. As far as our communities of practice and our wiki and overall our knowledge management program, we have a very strict governance in place where we have a team for each of our networks or chapters in the wiki, networks being a community of practice, and then the associated chapter. And it consists of a sponsor, a leader, an animator, a moderator, and that's the core team. Well, and then there's a greater core team that organizationally and geographically represents the community who are members. And so because there's so many people that are represented and because we're monitoring the teams, if somebody were to leave, we immediately find a replacement. Or most often, they're independent and they police themselves. So that's how we handle turnover. And we're getting pretty good at it. I'm looking at the product manager of our Communities of Practice application right here in the front row, and he told me yesterday, you keep pulling me into your presentations, and I'm just trying to spectate, but he knows a lot, and I'd recommend a conversation with him. His name is Adrian Villarreal.
So
Oh, thank you.
for me,
I'm sorry.
we ended up doing a lot of tagging on the content types themselves
Are we done?
so that it no longer resided within a specific product or within a specific silo. And you could just search on the product name, you could search on the type of document you were looking for, and so then it wasn't really, even if we reorged, it didn't matter because the content type and the products were still together.
Well, can we please give a round of applause for our presenters?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
And we'd like to be your favorite presentation of the day, so if you want to come up front, I will give you a GD3 Champion pen.
They're awesome pens.
Do they write up